Alright, hi everyone. So in this video I'm just going to go over basic interface of ZBrush. So this is me opening ZBrush. Something like this it will look for you as well. So I'm gonna close out of this window. Here you have the light box. It's called the light box. So here we have a lot of different demo excuse me, demo kind of projects that you can open and kind of quick start your sculpting through. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to go ahead and open this default project. So by double clicking, that's just going to open up a sphere. So first things first, we're going to do navigation. To rotate around your object, we're going to left click and drag. Left click and drag. We can see that up here there's this person head that kind of corresponds with our dragging. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the front view and just do a little nose here so we know where we're at. So to pan, we're going to press Option and left click and pan around. And to rotate, we're going to press, to zoom, we're going to press Option, left click, and then release Option, and then drag for zoom in and out. So you can do all of these same operations right down here. So there's a move button, click and drag, zoom, and rotate. Another one that's nice is this frame button. That's going to frame your object. Let's say you're really zoomed into it, you want to kind of zoom back out, F or frame, and it's going to frame it back to you. If you want to see the wireframe for this, click polyframe right here. So that's all for navigation. Next, we're going to cover this right side of the screen. So this is called the Tool tab. That's what you kind of are dealing with when you're dealing with your geometry. A lot of time is going to be spent right here when you're not sculpting. So tools are basically the models. So you can load the tool, so load a model, save as. If you click save as, you save the model as a Z tool, which basically is not a 3D model, but it is a ZBrush. It's a ZBrush file type, so you can open it back at ZBrush. If you click import and export though, that's where you can import and export OBJ or FBX files. So if I wanted to export this as an OBJ or FBX, I could just click export, and that's going to be kind of my model. The lightbox, if you ever need to access it, is right there. Here you can see your tool. Here, going down to the other tabs, subtool, this is kind of, again, you can see the layer, your tool right here. You can rename it. You can name it sphere demo, for example, or something else. You can, duplicate it, delete it, all that kind of jazz. Remesh it, project details, all that stuff we're going to get into later, but for now, that's all you need to know. And then next tab down, so the way I navigate here is by clicking and dragging, or you can also scroll. So next tab is geometry tab, and now we're going to kind of talk a little bit about subdivisions. So subdivisions are kind of one of the most important things in ZBrush that allows us to sculpt high definition. So if you go back to subtool tab and you hover over, you can see that there's 10 to 11,000 polys, right? So it's quite a lot, right? But you saw that I sculpted once, and you can see kind of the details right here. So if we wanted to subdivide it, every subdivision that we do is going to quadruple the amount of polygons that we have. So if I click divide, right now you can see that it's more geometry there, and now we have 44,000. So we had 10,000, now we have 44,000. So if we subdivide again, we're gonna have 44,000 times 4, right? And there are limits to these subdivisions because, you know, the more polygons you have, the heavier the model is, the more computing power the ZBrush has to kind of use in order for you to model it. So yeah, that's kind of right here. Another thing that you can keep in mind is this smooth button. So now when it's on, it's going to subdivide and smooth your model. If it's off and you subdivide, it's just going to subdivide the geometry without smoothing. So different use case scenarios for that. Next we're going to cover symmetry. So now you can see as I'm dragging here, maybe clicking, you can see that I'm sculpting symmetrically. So by default, symmetry is on. If you want to turn it off and just sculpt on one side, the hotkey is X. So now I'm just smoothing, sculpting on one side of it. If I turn X back on and I start sculpting, you know, so now this side is going to sculpt more because it already has more geometry. But yeah, so let's say we just sculpt in symmetry. If you want to go into symmetry and maybe have it be on a different axis, you can go up here into transform, and then we have here symmetry. So activate symmetry is X, so deactivate again. So you can see this button does the same thing. So you can also have Y symmetry, which is going to be up and down right here. So like that, right? Let's say I want to just, you know, kind of really double down on that nose. And Z symmetry as well, that is front and back. So by default it's X. And we also have something called radial symmetry, which is going to go around the model. So you can see if I go up here, this is radial symmetry. It has its use cases for sure. I mean, you can use create these kind of mandala looking sculpts basically. No, it kind of looks like a brain or something. But yeah, so that's all for the symmetry. I'm gonna turn off the radial symmetry. I'm gonna turn back the symmetry to X, but yeah, so now it's on. And lastly, we're gonna go over to this side of the screen, the left side of the screen, and over here we have our matte material, matte cap. So by default, I believe it's gonna be red for you guys, but I like to work in the matte cap gray because I think that kind of the sculpting is more accurate. The red one kind of sometimes seems to be a little more exaggerated when you sculpt on it. We have alpha, which we're gonna get into later. Dots, so that's basically what the stroke looks like. So it's a lot of different tiny dots that are making our stroke. If you drag, you can see how that is true. How it's like little dots kind of creating one big stroke. We can mess around with these, but I wouldn't. And then up here, finally, are brushes. So we have a bunch of different brushes. So I use probably on average 3 or 4 brushes out of all of these. I use the clay build-up brush, it's my favorite. And I use the Move Topology brush a lot. I use the polish brush a lot, and sometimes I use the inflate brush as well. So you guys can feel free to kind of mess around and see all the different brushes that you guys like. A lot of them you can't use just with the normal sculpting mode, but which is fine. We're gonna get to that maybe later in the class. But yeah, so there's all different brushes. Another thing is the brush size, right? So brush size is right up here. For the draw size, you can either click and drag here, or you can press S and click and drag. Z intensity is how intense your brush is. So if you have a pen, usually your intensity is going to be measured by how hard you press. So if I press really lightly, it's pretty light. If I press harder, it gets harder, right? And then I can go back to being very light, right? So if I push intensity all the way up and I try to sculpt something, it's gonna be, I would have to press lighter for it to be still pretty intense. So yeah, usually I just leave those at default. Another really handy brush is the smooth brush, and you access that by shift. Shift is smooth, so it kind of also turns into blue. So I usually just, you know, smooth everything out, because a lot of the times your sculpts are going to be kind of harsh, right? So everything organic is usually going to be smoothed out. And next I'm going to talk about some just, you know, standard practices of sculpting. It's really important to start sculpting from lower subdivisions and work your way up to higher subdivisions. So I will never go ahead and subdivide my model up to 1,000,000 polygons and start sculpting from there, because then the brushes are going to be very kind of fine and very distinct, and so when you want to kind of do that smoothing motion, it's going to be hard because the brushes are very distinct. So if I want to add, for example, some volume, right, with the clay tool, I want to add some volume, let's say for the cheeks, right? I don't know, just some sort of a cheek volume. Let's say I want to add a chin, you know, very, very rough, and I always use a combination of, you know, sculpting and smoothing, and sculpting and smoothing, and now, you know, maybe there's a line here, again, sculpt and smooth, sculpt and smooth. So I'm kind of making a lot of pretty big changes kind of all at once. So if I want to, I don't know, for example, let's say, forget about the face, like let's say I want to make, I don't know, a heart, right? That allows me to have it pretty, you know, fast and quick and dirty, basically, right? And then I can, the way I know when to start subdividing something is when I realize that, okay, I need more geometry to make this happen. So as I'm adding details, that's when I kind of understand, all right, I need to subdivide. So currently, right, I'm still in the beginning of my process, let's say, right, like I'm adding, I don't know, something under here, right, just smoothing, 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 adding some nostrils here. And another thing, always make sure to look at your model from different points of view, because in here it might look like a pretty long nose, but if you kind of go into different views, you can see that, you know, it's not as it looks like from the front. So yeah, another crucial thing that I forgot to say about brushes is if you press Option, your brush is gonna go into the opposite mode of taking away material instead of adding material. So if I want to create a nostril, I'm going to take away material and smooth it out, right? Wow, beautiful. Maybe increase the size here a little bit, make a little something here, great. Cute. Pretty scary. Halloween's coming. Yeah, so when I'm ready for more subdivisions or more details, I increase my subdivision level, and then I can, you know, kind of go in and add maybe a little more something. I don't know, you know, how that kind of works. So let's say we want to add like a little bit of a mustache. Let's say freaky one, but still, right? And now I'm just adding like general mustache, but let's say if I want to start creating little hairs, if I smooth down, change the size of my brush, if I try to add hairs, they don't really look that good, right? They look very jagged. So I'm Command Z to undo, and I'm gonna subdivide it like 2 more times, just for the sake of saving time. And now if I add the same hairs, they look a lot different, right? So now I can just kind of, you know, it's a lot different, basically. So the more you subdivide, the more finer details you can add to your model, basically. And even with these nostrils, I can press Option and dig into them a little more and smooth them out. Alright. Nice. Oh, and you see how kind of crisp it is now to sculpt, and if I were to sculpt this and smooth it, it's gonna be really hard for me to smooth it out because it's so crisp. So this is exactly why I wouldn't add that much geometry at a stage of high subdivision. Right. Nice. So last thing I want to talk about is masking. So sometimes you need to mask your model, and you want to avoid sculpting in certain areas. So the way you do it is press Control. That's gonna open your mask, and click and drag, and that's gonna apply mask all over, right? So now let's say I wanted to sculpt everywhere except for here, right? So when I sculpt, the masked area is not affected. If you want to, for some reason, invert the mask, you press Control and click. That's gonna invert it. Right, now I sculpt everywhere but over there. And if I want to get rid of it, I press Control and just click and drag off of the model. And now I have kind of a model like this. So that is the last thing I wanted to talk about. Yeah, just some stuff to keep in mind. Thank you for watching.